We're on 6A.
Drop in the chat.
Rava Amar, where we got up to, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. So we were talking about the mission that that said that once a woman has started the Sotah process, she's no longer eligible for Yibum. If the husband dies and there's no children and a brother, then rather than do Yibum, she does Chalitza. And we've been discussing where that's from. So Rava has a new theory about this. Rava Amar Kal V'chomer. It's from a logical deduction. Im Nasra b'mutar, you have this woman who's a Sotah. She's no longer allowed to sleep with her husband, right? Because once he starts that Sotah process, they're forbidden to sleep together. So ba'asr, so the brother, right, who at the time that the Sotah thing started, she was already forbidden to sleep with the brother, right? Because the brother-in-law. Okay, so now circumstances have changed, and the husband died, and she had the Yibum thing, but she wasn't even allowed to be living with the husband at the time. So certainly she shouldn't be allowed to marry the brother. But that's a kind of a weak Kal V'chomer, as the Gemara is going to point out right now. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye said Miata. Here's a counterexample. Kohen Gadol shekidesh v'zalman of a mace. You have a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, who is not permitted to marry a widow. Okay, well, what if he does? So if he does proceed and marries a widow, it actually works. It's forbidden. But many marriages that are forbidden, they don't even take effect. So if you try to marry your sister, it's meaningless, right? But the Kohen Gadol who marries a widow, the marriage is a marriage. It's just, it's something that he was not supposed to do. Okay, so what happens to a Kohen Gadol who marries a widow and then he dies? Okay, and he has a brother. Yeshloach Kohen Hedyot. He has a brother who is not a Kohen Gadol, just a regular Kohen. Lotus Yavim. So you should say, by the same logic, they shouldn't be allowed to do Yibum. They should have to do Chalitza. Why? Because in Nasra b'mutar la, if the woman who's a widow, she becomes asur to the husband, right? I mean, she was always asur to the husband. So the asur la l'kol shekain. So the brother, who, while the husband was alive, of course, she's not permitted to the husband's brother, but she's not permitted to the husband either, right? So certainly the brother, she should not be permitted to do Yibum with, by the same logic as what Rava tried to say about the Sotah and her brother-in-law. But Rava replies, Nasra, what, you're talking about the widow, Hasir Kaima. She was always forbidden to him. It's not like our case of the Sotah, right? In the Sotah, you have a legal marriage, everything is fine, until you encounter this difficulty that the husband suspects her and she starts the Sotah procedure, right? So then she becomes forbidden to him. You can't make an analogy to the case of the Kohen Gadol, who was never permitted to marry this woman, right? Yes, he married her, but he was never permitted to do so. So it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not an equivalent. It's not an analogous situation. So Abaye says, okay, so then look at it a different way. Eishas Kohen Shenensa. What about the wife of a Kohen who was raped? Okay, she was forced to sleep with someone else, right? So ordinarily, so then she was always permitted to the regular Kohen. They had a regular marriage, and then this incident occurs. This tragic incident occurs, and so when that happens, the husband is no longer permitted to sleep with her. Okay, and then umeis, and then the husband dies, and there's no children, and there's a brother Yeshloach halal, and he has a brother, but the brother is not a regular Kohen. The brother is a disqualified Kohen. Okay, the Kohen can become disqualified for various reasons, mostly by an improper marriage. Okay, or if the child of an improper marriage of a Kohen is a Kohen halal, he's a disqualified Kohen. Okay, so a disqualified Kohen cannot marry the widow of a Kohen. So he can't do Yibum. So Lotus Yapim. So then there shouldn't be, well, he can do Yibum, but he shouldn't be allowed to do Yibum. Why? Because he Nasrabam Mutala. So by the same logic as Rava tried before, if she was forbidden to the husband after she was violated by somebody else, so Ba'asr law, so somebody who was forbidden to her, the Halal brother, Lokoshikain, so she certainly continues to be forbidden to him. Okay, so Rava says it's also not a good analogy. Onus Bishra Mishra Shari. Bagabi Dahai Leke Isura. Rava says that the woman who was raped, she is permitted to marry another person who is not a Kohen. Bagabi Dahai Mialeke Isura. So about this, the brother, the Halal, there is no prohibition. So Rava denies the ruling of Abaye in the first place. So it's if you say that she is indeed allowed to marry the halal, then the objection to the idea of, if she was forbidden to the husband, then she's certainly forbidden to the brother, that goes away, because she's not forbidden to the brother any more than any other case of regular yibum. Okay, I hope that was clear. So next Mishnah, these women are forbidden, if they're married to a Kohen, to be supported by Truma. So of course, a woman who's married to a Kohen can eat Truma. She's part of the Kohen's household. But once the marriage dissolves or is challenged by, as we'll see, by the Sotah procedure, then she's no longer supported by him, and she's no longer permitted to eat Truma. So who are these women who are not no longer permitted to eat truma? Hameres Tmeani, a woman who says that Ima, leave it here. Ima, the kitchen is full of obstacles. Leave it here. It's fine. Sorry.
Going down the stairs to put away the stuff, okay?
Okay, so a woman who says Tmei Anila, who confesses to being unfaithful to her husband. So she's no longer permitted to live with the husband, to sleep with the husband, and so she's not permitted to be supported by Truma anymore either. Or Shabo Adam Shitmea, or not that she confessed, but witnesses testified that she was unfaithful. Same thing. Vomeris Eni Shosa, a woman who was accused of being a Sotah, and she refuses to drink the water. She refuses to participate in the ritual. So, she is basically in a state of limbo, right? She is forbidden to her husband because he initiated the Sotah procedure, suspected her of this infidelity, and she won't go through the procedure that would potentially clear her name, or clear up this uncertain state of infidelity. So if she doesn't want to do it, then she remains forbidden to the husband and can't eat truma. Or similarly, if the husband gets cold feet, he starts the Sotah procedure and then he doesn't want to go through with it, doesn't want to get to the point where she drinks the water. So same thing, she's in limbo, she's no longer permitted to him and she can't eat truma. And also, as I think we've seen before, once the Sotah procedure has been initiated and they're on their way to the temple to do the procedure, to complete the ritual, they're not permitted to sleep together. But if they do, then that kind of interrupts, and we'll see more details in the Gemara about how this affects about the details of not being permitted to each other until the procedure is complete, because it may no longer be effective. So there is no way out. Like, they've started the Sotah procedure, but if he slept with her, they slept together, then there's no way to complete the procedure, and so she's stuck in a non-cohabitation state, and therefore can't eat truma. Amar Rav Amar said, Hamil Samar on Rosh Hashanah, the Anharlan Einin Mimasnis. Rosh Hashanah told us something, and that actually enlightened us about the Mishnah. Sotah sheyesh la Eidim b'minasaya. There's a Sotah, and there exist witnesses that she actually was unfaithful, right? Not that she was secluded, but that she actually committed adultery. But these witnesses are not present; they're overseas, so we can't take their testimony to resolve the matter. So they go through with the Sotah procedure. Ein hamayim bodkinosa. The waters don't work, right? The Sotah procedure is supposed to either, indicate her guilt or innocence. Here she'll go through with the drinking of the water. Nothing will happen, but nothing will happen because since there are witnesses to her infidelity, the water won't work. Okay. My time, how do I know this? Because the pasuk says, "V'nistera v'hinidma ve'ed ein ba." So the Torah, in describing the Sotah, says that she was secluded with this guy, and she became tameh with him, meaning she was unfaithful, and there's no witness. Okay, so we've understood this to mean that there's no witness to oh yeah, so we're understanding this as being that there's no delay of the other. This whole thing only works if there is no witness. In other words, there's no witness to her actual, infidelity. But if there is, in this case, there is a witness, it's just not present and not able to give testimony, then it doesn't. The whole thing doesn't apply, which he's interpreting as meaning it doesn't work. So you go through the whole procedure, and nobody's any the wiser. But it so happens that there was somebody who witnessed it. We just don't know about it. So then the Sotah waters won't work. And we'll see some of the consequences of this, or how this plays out in a few minutes. The other law, Einin mimasnisin. So Rav Amram says that this enlightened us about our Mishnah. How so? Because our Mishnah says, "V'shabo la'edim shehitmea." Witnesses came that she was unfaithful. So when are we talking about? At what point did these witnesses show up? If we're talking about before she drinks the water, zonahi, right? there's witnesses that she committed adultery. So there's no point in proceeding. She's guilty of adultery, and you follow that path. You don't have to verify with the water whether she's unfaithful. You have witnesses. Ella levasar d'shasai. Must be after she drank the water. So she's completed the ritual, and then witnesses come forth and say that we witnessed her being unfaithful. So Yamras b'shlomayin and bodkin also shapir. So if you think that if there were witnesses, the waters don't work, it makes sense, right? She drank the water. She's guilty. Right? Obviously, she's guilty. There were witnesses, right? That's the case we're talking about here. She's guilty. Why didn't the waters work? Well, the water should have killed her right there, right? But so it makes sense according to this Mishnah, because the Mishnah says the waters won't work if there was a witness. And indeed, the witnesses came forward. The water didn't work. The witnesses came forward. That's the case here. Eli Amras mind bodkinosa. But if you don't accept that, if you say the waters work, then we would have to disbelieve the witnesses, right? The water didn't kill her, so we would have to say she's innocent, and the witnesses must be false witnesses. Yosef says no. This is not necessarily according with them. The olam emalach mind bodkina. So really, I could say the waters work. You know why the waters didn't work? Yes, she was unfaithful. The witnesses are correct. The waters didn't work because she had some merit that saved her from the waters. Okay. Okay, so this is a new concept, right? That you could go through the Sotah procedure, you could be guilty, but the waters are not going to harm you because you're a good person. You give charity, you study Torah, whatever it was, whatever this zechus is, whatever this merit is, can save you from the ordeal of the water. So the fact that witnesses then came and claimed that she was unfaithful, it could be true. You'll say the waters didn't work. The waters didn't work for some other reason. Really, she's guilty, but the waters didn't work because she is otherwise, an exemplary person, and she has that schus. But my kamifli, so what is Rav Shesh's view opposing this? But b'misnavna de Rebbe, what they're arguing about is what happens to this woman who has zechus. Is she completely unharmed by the waters, or is it a slower death? In other words, does her condition more gradually deteriorate until she ultimately dies from whatever intestinal disease or whatever that the waters cause. Ditnan, what's this about? We have a Mishnah, Rabbi Omer, Zechus Tolam Mayim Amarim, that if you have a person who has the proper merit, then the waters tola, it's like it hangs there, or it delays or ameliorates the situation. So what happens? She doesn't give birth to children. Like one of the promises for the innocent woman is that if she drinks the water, she will bear children. But this woman who is guilty, but the waters don't affect her, they affect her in the following way: she will not have children, and she doesn't her health doesn't really she doesn't have robust health anymore. She doesn't her health declines, I guess you would say, gradually. Ella misnavna v'holechas l'sof shehi misa ba'osa misa. She gradually gets to the same death. Like we're expecting a dramatic thing that when she drinks the water, that she dies instantly. What happens to someone who has zechus is it takes a while, it takes time. It's a progressive disease kind of thing. But Rosh Hashanah savar bein l'Rabbi bein l'Rabbanan havia misnavna. Rosh Hashanah says everybody agrees with this, that if the water doesn't work, then everybody thinks that it could just be taking a while, and so this is a support to our Mishnah, because you could tell if she doesn't, if over the next few days she doesn't start to deteriorate, then that denies or contradicts the evidence of the witnesses, and we can say that the witnesses were false witnesses. For Rabbi Yosef Savar, Rabbi no, it's only Rabbi that holds this about the gradual decline. The rabbis say no, if it just doesn't work at all. Okay, so if it doesn't work at all, then there's nothing to contradict the witnesses. Masi Rav Shimi Barashi, Rav Shimi asks, Rabbi Shimon Omer in zechus tola b'mayim hamayim. Rabbi Shimon says that zechus, that merit, doesn't help. It's not going to save you from the waters. B'imata Omer zechus tola b'mayim hamayim, because if you say that it does, madcha ata samayim b'fnei kol nashim hashosos, then then every time a woman drinks the water and doesn't die, people will say, she's guilty, but die because she's otherwise a good person, right? She gives charity, she's whatever, but really she's guilty of adultery. You're undermining the whole thing. If it only works sometimes, it only works if you don't have the right schus, then it undermines the whole procedure. People will say that they're actually unfaithful, but they had a zechus that saved them. So if Rav Sheshis is right, you should be able to say the same thing about if there are witnesses that are not present, that are overseas, if that causes the water is not to work, then that also undermines the whole thing, right? Because people will say, "Oh, you know why she didn't die? Because really she's guilty, and there's actually witnesses for it, and we just don't know where they are. But really, even though she survived the ordeal, she's still guilty." So the Gemara says, "Well, Shimon Kamaras, you're trying to align Rav Sheshes with Rav Shimon's view. Rav Shimon Midas Chus Talia Edim Nami Lo Talia, according to Rabbi Shimon, like he doesn't agree with the Mishnah, right? It would make sense to say that, right? That if Rav Shimon says there isn't any zechus that can get that can let you off the hook from the ordeal, that cancels the effects of the ordeal. Similarly, he would say this isn't so, that the idea that if there are witnesses somewhere, then she's off the hook, then the ordeal doesn't work. No, because that indeed would undermine the whole thing. So he disagrees with the whole premise that witnesses, the existence of witnesses, countermands the effects of the waters. Masi Brab Saravas Ve'elu Minchasein Nisrafos. We're going to try to bring a proof from a different area. Okay, so just hold that thought for a minute while we examine this Mishnah that Rav brings. These are cases of a mincha, right? Remember that a Sotah brings, as part of the procedure, she brings a mincha, flower offering. So this Mishnah is dealing with flower offerings that if they don't end up being offered on the altar, they can just be used by anybody, right? They're not hekdesh at all. What are they? Homeris Tuani, a woman who says, I was unfaithful, and also, or somebody whose witnesses come and testify that she was unfaithful. So if she's definitely was unfaithful, then the Sotah procedure that you started can be canceled. Because what's the point of an ordeal, trial by ordeal, if the trial has already been dealt with by witnesses, right? So the mincha that she was going to bring is canceled, and you can use that flower for any purpose, because it was kind of, I guess you'd say, it was retroactively not sanctified for this purpose, because it's no longer needed. So when did these witnesses come that she was actually unfaithful? When we come into Tikdosh, if you want to say before that, like nobody had set aside the flower yet, okay, for the mincha. So obviously it was never made hekdesh. So obviously you can use it for whatever you want to use it. It never got designated for this mincha. So typical fun, of course, it becomes fully el levasser de kiddush. So it must be that we're talking about when the woman already set aside the flower, designated it for the Sotah sacrifice. And then it turns out that we don't need to do the Sotah sacrifice because she admitted her guilt, or because witnesses came at that point to say that she was definitely guilty. So if you want to say that the water works, even if there are witnesses somewhere, Alma Bas Mikdash Umikrafi. So then the mincha is eligible for a sacrifice. The Kadosh Meikara, and when it was originally designated and put into the clay shards and put into the bowl in the temple, Shapir Kadosh, it was correctly sanctified. That's why it has to be burned, right? It can't be used by anybody else. If you say the water doesn't work, right? So if it turns out that if the waters aren't going to work, then once the witnesses arrive, then it becomes clear retroactively that the original designation of this flower for a Sotah sacrifice was incorrect, right? Because since she was definitely unfaithful, there's no Sotah procedure. needed. The typical chulin. It should. Why do you need to burn it? It should go. It should just be regular chulin. So Ravina answers, "Kagon shazin sabazar." Yeah, this is a kind of an outlandish case, okay, but what the witnesses are saying is that right there in the temple where she came to do the Sotah procedure, after she designated the flour and put it in the klei sharis, in the temple vessel, then she went and committed adultery right there in the temple. The chikano shmei kara.
Yeah,
So,
with the young priest to get talked about elsewhere.
yeah. So the chikano shmei kara shapir kadosh. So indeed, when she designated the mincha to be sacrificed, she was still under suspicion, and nobody ever comes to contradict or to testify about what happened before. So anything that happened before, the adultery she was suspected of before, that's still suspected and hasn't been resolved, and you need the water for that. So what the witnesses are talking about is after that, they witnessed her being unfaithful, and so that's why the mincha still has to be burned, right? It can't be used as chulin because it's still, even though the woman is now convicted of adultery, it's not the adultery that was being checked by the Sotah water, right? The Sotah water was still, sure, the mincha doesn't have to be brought anymore because she's got worse problems, right? I mean, we don't have to complete the Sotah procedure because she's now been convicted of adultery, like blatant adultery, and has to be punished for that. And the Sotah thing is not relevant anymore, okay? And that's why the mincha has to be destroyed and can't be used as the Sotah sacrifice, and can't be used as regular flour. So Maski flour of Masharsha asked about that. Wait a minute. The whole time that the woman is being subjected to this procedure, she's got an escort, right? Even while traveling, as we'll see, she's got a couple of escorts to make sure they don't sleep together. And even in the temple, there are Kohanim assigned to her to escort her. So how could she have committed adultery, right? She's being watched all the time. So why answer yeah, those escorts were the ones that she committed adultery with. Ravashi says, it don't have to be so drastic. Just because they're escorting her, they're not with her 100% of the time. She went to the ladies' room, right? They're not going to accompany her into the washroom, and that's where she encountered her lover and committed adultery. So even though she's being escorted, that doesn't mean that she doesn't have an opportunity to sin. Like we think that they're not attached to her. They're not attached to her head. That there's still opportunities for her to seclude herself and do what she wants to do to evade the escort. Rav Papa Amar. Rav Papa says, actually, we're talking about, we don't have to resort to this crazy idea that she committed adultery in the temple. Typical feeling. So you said that the mincha, that they were talking about a regular case where the witnesses are testifying about her previous adultery, and you're saying that then the Sotah thing never took effect. And the flour goes to chulin, midrabanan. Yeah, really, it's chulin. But the rabbi said, you know what? Don't let this flour, even though technically it could be used by anybody, it's not hektish because retroactively there was no need for the Sotah procedure at all. Nonetheless, the rabbi said, let's not use this flour. Because people will see, see this flour? It was in the temple vessel, and then they didn't need it anymore, and they gave it to, they had it for dinner that night. So that's so in this case, it's actually correct, but people will draw the wrong lesson and think that in general, something that was sanctified can be treated this way. Masi Rav Mari asks, "Nitmeis minchasa ad shel kidsha b'chli, harei kachol haminachos v'tipada." The Brisa says that what happens if this mincha became tameh before So she designated this flour and it became tummy. So it's like any other mincha, and that's designated but hasn't yet been put in the temple vessel, and it can be redeemed. You can redeem it, buy it back, or redeem it with other flour. Misha kitcha b'kli, but after it's been put in the temple vessel, like any other mincha that's been placed in a temple vessel and has to be burned if it's not used. Okay. So, and that's one thing in the brisa. Then kadash hakometz, if the procedure of the mincha continued and it was in the literally, this means that the Kohen took the handful of it already, but apparently we're understanding this to be that it was just put in the temple vessel. Well, he speaks like and so what happens? You've got this mincha, it's in the temple vessel, ready to go, and then the owner dies, right? The husband dies, or the wife dies. So like any other mincha, it's ownerless and it's to be destroyed. It can't be offered on the altar, can't be used for regular purposes. And karav hakometz, what if you already offered it on the altar? And they didn't. Now the Kohen gets the leftovers, right? What you do with the mincha is the Kohen takes a handful, puts it on the altar, and the rest the Kohen gets to keep. So what happens if he already offered the handful of flour on the altar, but he didn't yet get to eat the leftovers, and then somebody dies, that one of the husband or the wife dies? That can be eaten by the Kohen. Because ordinarily an ordinary mincha where the owner died, the Kohen would not be allowed to eat the leftovers. But in this case, since it's only coming for a case of doubt, like it already determined, what was going on here with this case. So the issue has been resolved basically, and so it's fine for him to consume the rest of the mincha, even though the owner died, because this isn't a case of kapara, of offering atonement for the person who is now dead. This is a case of resolving a doubt, and that doubt has been resolved already, so it doesn't matter at this point if the owner dies. And bola edim sheitmea, and if witnesses came before the offering of the mincha, witnesses came that she was unfaithful, then the mincha is invalid and has to be burnt. Nimtzu edazom. What if the witnesses turn out to be false witnesses? Specifically the edim zomin, which are a specific type of false witness that has its own category. Minchasa chulin. Then the mincha becomes chulin, becomes non-sacred. It can be released for general use. Because there were no witnesses, right? The witnesses are proven to be false witnesses, and therefore, so once there are false witnesses about her infidelity, the whole doubt of the Sotah thing vanishes. There was no need for the Sotah procedure to begin with, and so there was no need for this mincha. And so, even though it had been placed in the temple vessel, it was never really sanctified. Okay, so this contradicts what we were saying before, because before we tried to say that, even though the mincha is really chulin, is really not sanctified, but once it's been put in the temple vessel, we don't want people to get the wrong idea, because ordinarily things that are put in the temple vessel are no longer eligible for regular use. This is a special case, but since it's a special case, we don't want people to draw the wrong conclusions about other cases. Okay, but here we're saying that, yeah, it's already been placed in the temple vessel, but because of the circumstances, turns out there was no need for it. And so, okay, we're going to release it to for general use. How come? It doesn't accord with what we said before, that we don't want people to get the wrong idea. So the Gemara says, well, there's a difference. Eidim zomim kamak. You're talking about a case of Eidim zomim. So Eidim zomim kol yisluhu. No, everybody's going to talk about that. That's a gossipy case, right? When there are false witnesses, right? Everybody's going to be talking about that. So everybody's going to know the circumstances, and they will understand that the reason that this mincha was released for general use is because there were false witnesses, and the Sotah thing was never operative in the first place, right? So they'll understand that's why, and they won't apply it to other situations. Whereas the other case where there were no false witnesses, we're talking about where we're talking about in the case where there are no false witnesses, and there was just the existence of witnesses somewhere that is presumed to have nullified the effect of the waters, that's not going to be well known. So people will draw the wrong conclusions. Yeah, let's continue with that stuff. We have support for Rav Sheshes. It's a lot of mitame, but not the reason that we saw already. Tahora, the Brisa says Tahora, then she's innocent, right? If the Torah says if Vimlo if the woman had not sinned and she was pure, then she'll be pronounced innocent and she will bear children. So that's only the niksa if she is if she is actually tahora, if she is actually innocent, right? But if there are witnesses somewhere else, right, then that means she's not really innocent. So that is the support for Rav Sheshes, that she's not going to be, she's not going to, she may survive the Sotah ordeal, but she's not going to bear children because there were witnesses somewhere, and she's not really tahora. She can't be. We understand that she's not really innocent. Utahara, and there's an extra vav there, and she is tahar. Velosha tolsola zchus, and not including someone who is she survives because she has these other merits. Okay, that's also not included in this in the bearing of children result. So someone who is actually guilty, but the waters didn't work on her, she's not going to survive the ordeal and have children. He, and it says she is an extra word. She is tahar. Velo sheyisu v'yitnu mozros balavana. That such a woman who is cleared by the waters will bear children, but not someone who is subject to endless speculation about whether she was innocent or guilty. Someone who is widely assumed to be guilty is not, the water doesn't work the same way about her. So Rabbi Shimon, what about Rabbi Shimon, who says that what is all this extra stuff for if he doesn't even accept the premise that the water doesn't work on someone with zuchus? He devav lozarish. Okay, so you can get away from the idea of the extra vav, the and she is tahara. So that we can, that we understand. What about someone that there's witnesses about her overseas, so they're not present? Lo shlichos, the Gemara says, yeah, how often does that happen, right? First of all, how often does it happen that there's actually witnesses to adultery, right? Usually it's something that's done in private. And the idea that there are somewhere witnesses that are not present currently, that's too uncommon for us to be concerned about. Okay, and we will stop here and pick up tomorrow with the Mishnah on 7a. Wish everybody, yeah. And,
Thank you, Doug. Have a good day, all.
Have a good day.
bye.
Yashar Chag Kosher V'Sameach.
And to you.